Well, I want to say good morning to each of you. It is great to welcome you here to Stonehill Community Church. And I'm Pastor Joey, and it's a privilege to preside over this service today. It is every week, actually, but especially today. What we're going to do today, just to kind of lay out our agenda for us today, is we want to talk a little bit about another installment in the Believe series, Believe chapter 22. And when I say that, there's a free book for you if you haven't already received it. It's a free book in the back on the table. It's about that thick, and we're in chapter 22. It's called Believe is the larger series title, and we're umbrelling a lot of different movements, topics, and themes within that. And the theme today happens to be joy. Despite my circumstances, I feel inner contentment and understand my purpose in life. And so we're going to be dealing with that theme in just a moment. And then after that, I'll probably share a story with you to help amplify what I'm trying to get across to you in the message this morning. And I want to do a good job there, so I want to illustrate that from the life of an author I've read recently, and Ann Voskamp. Maybe you've heard of her. And then after that, it is a very special privilege of mine to preside over yet another Stonehill Community Church baptism. And so it's Baptism Day, praise God. And so we've got at least 5 or 6 candidates, baptisms that will be part of this morning. And if you're here this morning and you're the guest or friend or family member, and you're here with the person that's being baptized, we thank you so much for being here, and we'll give you an opportunity in just a second. All the baptism candidates will be released to go prepare themselves, and then you'll be invited to join them here on the platform at the time of their baptism. And then this can be a very special day for you. We always have an opportunity for people to be impromptu baptisms, what we call them. You came to church today not fully expecting to leave dry, okay? You came and you thought, well, I'll go to church and I'll come home, and had no idea that you would even think about going home wet. Well, today might be a very powerful day in your life. You're here today and you want to join me in the water, okay? You want to join me and these who are being baptized and a host of others who've been baptized into the Jesus Christ. And praise God for, obviously, if you have a desire to be baptized, something new has already happened in you. Baptism is just that first discipleship step that we take. And so, really, Jesus said, basically, and his followers, we don't have to get all creative in how we do this. Basically, the pattern is confess Jesus, lean back, and hold your breath. Okay, here we go. And that's basically the way it works. All right, no probationary period to wait and see if anything takes or anything like that. It's foreign to the gospel. It's foreign to grace. It's foreign to what the Bible has to say about baptism. And so if you're here and something stirs when the waters are moved and you want to be a part of that, then you're welcome to. And we would just invite you. We've got extra towels, and there's plenty of room here in the tank. So with that, let's go ahead and talk about a couple of things I think are important. And this theme actually is very important and dear to me, because I happen to believe that if we understand purpose in life, we can't help but derive a lot of joy from that. Okay? And I would call it deep joy. Deep joy. Something that elevates us, transcends us above the circumstances of life. Now, if you're like me, I tend to let circumstances get me down. Anybody else with me on that? Okay? Probably a few of you let circumstances get you down sometimes. And I do. I'm unlike anybody else in that way. I let circumstances weigh me down sometimes. And I really want to have a walk with God, a walk with Christ, where I can have a joy that's not tied to circumstances so much. And what Paul teaches us in the Bible, in Philippians chapter 4, verses 10 through 13, what Paul teaches us is that, and if you want to flip that up on the screen for me, maybe now would be a good time just to read through those verses. Okay, Philippians chapter 4, verses 10 through 13, what you're going to notice here before we read through it, you're going to notice that purpose in life, contentment, joy, whatever synonym you want to put as a placeholder into that equation of your life. When you're trying to figure out what it is that's going to give you joy in life, purpose in life, contentment in life, of course for Paul it's Christ, okay? But the thing I want you to note is that he said this is something that we learn. It's not so much something that we discover. It's not so much something that we define. It's not so much something that we look for and we eventually find it one day and we've got the secret. No, I don't think it's that at all. I think it is a process of trial and error. We try what we think will make me happy and make us happy. We try this, we try that, it doesn't work. We try this approach, we try that book, this idea, this religion, this ideology, this philosophy of life, these priorities, these kinds of attitudes, these kinds of goals and accomplishments. We try these things, and then when we get to the place in our life and it's not quite what we thought it would be, it's what C.S. Lewis called the inconsolable longing. We got what we thought we wanted, and it still feels empty. What do we do now? You see, Paul got to that place in his life. And you, if you're not there yet, you'll eventually get to that place in your life. The inconsolable longing. I pursued what I thought would make me happy, and I still feel empty. And that scares the bejeebies out of people. I don't know what that word means, but it just scares them really bad. Okay? And when they get to that place and they realize it's got to be more than this, Jesus says, here I am. Here I am. And that's why, I've been following on Life Purpose since 1991. I've got 80 some odd books in my library that have pages written down in my filing book that tell me where to go to see somebody's insight on life purpose. What is it? Because I've been pursuing it my whole life. Because I have a feeling once I nail that down, I'm going to have deep joy. That's not going to be tied to circumstances. I'm going to have contentment, and I'm going to learn this thing, right? Paul says we learn it. He says, I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned. Okay, Paul, it's been like 8 years. The Philippians, as a congregation in Philippi, evidently they've had concern for him in the past. But he says, you've renewed your concern for me. In other words, you've loved and cared for me in the past, but some things have happened. Okay, I've been arrested. I've been traveling everywhere. You guys have had a tough time keeping track of me. People have tried to assassinate me. It's been years, but now you're renewing your concern for me. I'm in prison in Rome, and indeed you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. In other words, no guilt trip from me. God has been there faithfully, helping me flesh out the purpose of life faithfully. Okay, so you don't have to, there's no guilt trips from me. Okay, I'm not saying this because I'm in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I have learned to be content. I have learned what the purpose of life is. I have learned what true joy is. No matter the circumstances, I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. And this is it. I can do all of this, all things through Him who gives me strength. And that's why I'm saying, after all of those 80 some odd books that I went through and referenced, and not all of them, but many of them referenced this week in my personal library, I want to see what I've been reading all of these years. I want to see what these guys have to say about life purpose, contentment, and joy. And they'll talk about a transcendent signifier. That's kind of a fancy phrase. A transcendent signifier. We all need a bigger reason for doing what we're doing, other than just the day-to-day. Other than just cooking meals, changing diapers, going to work, and doing whatever it is we do. We need a transcendent signifier, they say. Some will talk about a restorative niche. A place to go where you're your true self. Some will even talk about a quiet desperation when it comes to joy and life purpose and contentment. Some will talk about an insignificant meaninglessness, that there's nothing that matters in life. And that's all your existential philosophers and things will come under that canopy. And like I said, some will talk about the inconsolable longing. Well, where am I on life purpose? Where am I on joy and contentment? How would I say it? Mr. File all these books over the years, Pastor. How am I going to phrase this thing? Here's how I'd phrase it to you. Take the complex, make it simple, and call yourself an educator, right? Call yourself a pastor. Let's make it simple this morning. You know what? Our purpose is to know and love a person. Simple? Our purpose is to know and love a person. That's it. And when you know and love a person, and you know you've been, his identity, the new identity he has proclaimed over humanity, including you, you have a new identity, and he invites you up into something bigger and more transcendent and greater and more significant than you could ever create for yourself. And he tells you who you are and what you're here for, and he's put a voice within you that's given you a job to do in the world. And the process of all of life, when it's all said and done, if we have gotten to know Him a little better and love Him a little more, we have learned that life is about loving and knowing a person. You see, life purpose and contentment and joy, it's a learned deal. It's not automatic. It's not instantaneous. It's by trial and error. And this morning, I challenge you, you've been on this trial and error journey for so long, and what the gospel says, it extends to you an opportunity and says, okay, now that you've tried all of this, now that you've dabbled in all of this, now that you've read all of this, now that you've acquired all of this, now that you've accomplished all of this, here I am. I am the only one that can deal with the inconsolable longing, to use a C.S. Lewis phrase. I'm the only one. And you see, Augustine, several years ago, 1700 years ago, in fact, on slide number 3, if you just flip to my slide for me, he said of life purpose and joy and meaning, he said, you have made us for yourself, speaking of God and to God, you have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they find themselves in you. Isn't that true? We are created by God and for God. We are restless wanderers until we find ourselves in God. And when we get to that place where we say there must be something more, the Scriptures help us understand where that longing comes from and how we have to answer that question and how we have to define the purpose of life. It's like Tom Brady when they asked, what Super Bowl was the best one? I mean, he's been in like 7, won 5, on his way maybe to another one. What's your best Super Bowl? And he says, the next one. It's the next one, right? There's something in our Tom Brady hearts that wants something more. I'll just look for the next one. And when we just look for the next one and the next one and the next one, and whatever that next one's going to be for you, when we fix our affections on that, it breeds discontent. And we lose our joy because we lose sight of this loving a person, getting a person idea, the basic definition of the purpose of life. And that's it, guys. That's it. That's 85 books in. That's filing since 1991. That's Googling and Yahooing and it's classes and it's conversations and it's videos and it's YouTubes and it's this massive search. God, I want to know the purpose of life. I got to know it. I cannot live my life and not know why I'm here. Okay? And sometimes it'd be like, some of us for so long, it's like, you illustrate it this way, you go to the mall and you see somebody at the mall, right? And maybe in that conversation, you'll ask, well, hey, what are you doing here? And most time people have a reason, especially if you're a guy, you have a reason for being in the mall. You're a point shopper, right? I mean, exactly, you go in, you get what you need, you're out. But sometime you talk to somebody who says, what, I have no idea why I'm here. I'm just here wandering around the mall. I don't know. I'm just here. Right? And that's kind of crazy, isn't it, to think about it that way. You mean you're wandering around in the mall and have no idea why you're here? Yep, that's me. And that's how a lot of people face life. Well, what are you doing in life? What's your purpose? What's mankind's purpose? I don't know. We're just wandering around. We see something on sale and we go buy it. Then, whoo, we feel good. All right? We go to that restaurant. They got soup of the day, a salad. It's half price. We eat. We come home. Okay? Again, we watch the Patriots win another one. And that's the way it goes. I mean, it's never going to be any different. That's the script, right? Well, I can't live that way. I can't. My joy is tied to circumstances when I choose to live life on that level. And you can't live that way. And I can't live that way. And so we need something, a transcendent cause, a purpose, a definition, and not just a definition. It's not a definition that's sterile. It is a relationship. It is a knowing of Christ and knowing that there's somebody with me through the ups and downs of life. If I'm full, great. If I'm empty, great. But there's somebody walking with me through all this thing called life who knows me intimately, my thoughts and purposes of my heart. And He walks with me, a restless wonder. He walks with me and He helped me over time to flesh out the fact that what I'm really looking for is this close, intimate, personal walk. And Augustine has it nailed down, I think, when he says that you have made us for yourself and our hearts are restless until they find themselves in you. And Paul has it nailed down when he says, I've learned to be content no matter the circumstances. And so when we finally realize that Christ has spoken a new identity over us and all of humanity, we get to the place that where everything in our search, our career, our assets, our abilities, our contributions, our loves, our joys, our romances, our stories, it all begins to point to someone when we understand our purpose in life. And hopefully, by the time life concludes, it could be said that we fulfilled our purpose, that we got to know and love a person through all that we did and all that we experienced. And so this morning, in a very gentle and kind way, I challenge your definition of what you define, how you define the purpose of life, how you define contentment, how you define joy. I'm going after that this morning. And I'm challenging you to redefine it based on what we're learning from Christ, based on what we're learning from church saints over the years, based on what we're learning from Paul. He says you've got to redefine your purpose in life, and the way you got to redefine it is you can do all things. I can. You can. Whatever it is that you wonder and question whether or not you can make it, okay? You can learn life purpose, you can learn contentment, you can learn joy, and the I can applies to your relationships, it applies to your attitudes, it applies to your contentment. The I can. And so this morning the question is, what is your purpose? What is your reason for life? Is it beauty? I got news for you. You're going to wrinkle eventually. Okay? It's coming. It's coming. Sure as shooting, that wrinkle's coming. All right? Is it competition? Well, somebody's going to come along and do a better job eventually. Is it family? You know, one or more of your family members is going to disappoint you somewhere along the way, in some way, and to some degree. Is it your possessions? You'll have to let them go in time. Is it your job? Somebody will come along and do it in your place someday. I hope you know that. They will. And so I'm contending this morning that the way we define our purpose in life, the way we define contentment and joy, there has to be a major mega shift in that, because the way we define it is going to be tied to circumstantial things, and when it's tied to circumstantial things, you're at the mercy of your circumstances, many of which you cannot control. And so your life is going to always be this, and there's nothing going to help you ride the tides and storms of life, the ups and downs of life. The person that you need is not going to be where he needs to be, and you're not going to be where you need to be with him in your life to get through those times. So what I'm essentially saying to you this morning, My purpose is to know and love a person. Your purpose as human beings is to know and love a person. And when we define life that way, everything else, all other loves are safe. All other priorities are safe because we've got the right priority in place. I was thinking in the last couple months actually, so many of us are looking to identify things a certain way, and I just kind of got fed up with it one day, and I thought, well, what am I going to, all these different things that we look to for our identity. So I just got on my Facebook thing, just pull that up real quick. Got on my Facebook thing, and basically I said, you know what? It's identity in Christ alone, not an icon, not a status, not an orientation, not a politician, not a flag, not an award, okay? My identity has to be in Christ alone. And so now don't misunderstand me. I'm glad to get an award, but I'm not seeking it, and I won't modify my plan to glorify Christ if I don't get one. You see that? And I love America, and she's beautiful, and I'm so patriotic, but my identity is not based in my nationality, as if that gives me brownie points with God. Okay? I'm certainly not going to live my life and give my best efforts all in the name of a political party, although being involved politically is an important process. Okay? But that's not my identity at my core. And I think there's something wrong in a culture where we base an entire life direction on what our sexual preferences are, and we make everything in life about an orientation. I think there's something wrong in a culture that does that. And my marital status or my social status or my Facebook status might say something about me and what I believe is important and who I care about and who I love. But I'm not going to look to anybody to meet my every need and make the world all about my happiness and all about making my circumstances better. Because I understand something. And I think I just got frustrated one day with all I was seeing out there on social media. It's like, you know what? This is what I'm going to put out there. Because this is how I really feel about it. And because I understand what Augustine and what Paul and a host of others understand, that my purpose is to know and love a person. And so when I do, all other loves are safe. And so I'll enjoy marriage and I'll discover intimacy. But I won't expect my wife to make her world about me and me meeting all of my needs all the time. I'll enjoy her and I'll enjoy the relationship, but I don't have to be the center of that world, you see. And I'll graciously accept awards if they come. And I'll even accept participation medals. Forget first place. Just that I was here, that I tried, okay? I'll even accept that. But I'm not going to base what I do on awards I might or might not receive. I'll beam with pride when someone belts out the national anthem. The NFL is kind of obliterating those from our pre-games now, I've noticed. It deeply disappoints me. But I beam with pride when someone belts out the national anthem. But I'm not expecting my nation to make me happy all the time. It's not their job to make me happy and define purpose in life. They'll never be able to define that for me. You understand? I'll work hard to produce thought-provoking messages that resonate with real life. And I'll enjoy my masculinity and live out the bearded gospel, praise God. And being a man and feel no compunction to feminize my masculinity. But my life purpose is to know and love a person and do this with a good attitude no matter what life outcomes come my way. And this purpose and this person stays with me, and I don't lose this person regardless of my status, regardless of my citizenship, regardless of my marital status or my social status. All of these things that seem are tied circumstantially, our happiness, our joy, our purpose is tied circumstantially to so many things. And Paul says they got to elevate above it the inconsolable longing. The only way you can define the purpose of mankind, the purpose of life, is to know and love a person. And until you learn that, expect a lot of this, because life, that's the nature of life. And expect a lot of struggle, because you've tied your definition of joy, contentment, and purpose to the wrong things. And life is just going to fluctuate with those things. And so this morning, what I offer to you is I challenge you to redefine the purpose of humanity and why we're here. And when you redefine that, then all of a sudden, we understand contentment and joy and purpose so much better. I like how Max Lucado defines contentment. He says, it's a state of the heart in which you would be at peace if God gave you nothing more than He already has. Isn't that awesome? Contentment is not automatic. It is something that we have to learn. Defining the purpose in life is not automatic. We have to learn it over time. Defining what joy is in life, it's not automatic. We have to learn what it is over time. We flesh it out. Eventually we come to rest on what that definition is going to be and what it truly is. And now don't misunderstand me this morning. There's nothing wrong with working to change your circumstances. That's perfectly A-okay. All right? We can, and this time of year, beginning of a new year, we think in terms of resolutions and things. Some people do anyway, and people want to start new routines, and people want to do more of what they truly love. They want to connect with others more. They want to work really hard, maybe get a promotion. They have these goals, and that's all good, and all these things can help. And even when we are in circumstances that we can't control, though, we can change our attitude, and that's Paul's secret. That's his secret. That he knew he controlled his attitude and his outlook and how he defined things, and how he knew that Christ wanted him to define things. And so I would just reiterate here this morning, he learned, verse 12, Philippians 4:12, flip it back up for me. He learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. What's the secret? I can do all things in Christ. We see Philippians 4:13. We'll hear it a lot of times. Maybe an athlete does something special, and then they'll be interviewing the athlete after the game. And I love, or the contest. We got the Olympics coming up, all right? And there'll be some things happening here in February. And it would bring me great joy to once again hear an incredible athlete say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And that's televised on all the TV stations all over the world, right? I'd love to see that happen. I'd love to witness that. And I think it's awesome. But I think sometimes this verse can be used as kind of a magic formula that I can just say this verse. I don't have to practice at ice skating. I can just say this verse and then I'll win a gold medal in the Olympics because it's kind of a magical formula, right? No, I don't think that's the way it works. I don't care how many times I quote that. If you put a pair of skates on me, it's not going to go well. I assure you of that. I'll just stick with running 50 Ks and sub-zeros. I have a better chance at that than ice skating, okay? But here's what it means. Listen closely. If we consider all that Paul has said, even to the Philippians as a whole, in the whole book, here's what it means. Here's what I can do all things through Him who gives me strength means, okay? In the day-to-day fluctuations, and I want you to think about this, church. Think about this. In the day-to-day fluctuations, whether a large spread or sparse pickings, whether many friends or just a few, whether lots of good news or a meager report, whether incarcerated or free, whether well-funded or empty ledgers, Paul was in jail, in prison at this time in Rome, okay? Paul knew a stability that enabled him to rise above the daily fluctuations. The power of the Lord was with him. And so thus what Paul says is that in whatever circumstances I find myself, in whatever extremes I find myself, whatever they are, whether I'm experiencing abundance, hanging out and smoozing with the wealthy, or fellowshipping with the poor, or struggling to proclaim the gospel to people who don't want to hear it, or enduring the wrath of the establishment, all of these things he was experiencing, or bringing peace to the church, or languishing in prison, feeling like everybody in the world has forgotten me, I can be content, and I can find that I can do all things through Him who gives me strength. The purpose of life is to know and love a person, and I can get to do that. I can get to know Him and love Him right here, right where I am. And so being content is not contingent upon having all that you want, but on being thankful and satisfied with all that you have. One time we went to a church service and the pastor was preaching on a theme similar to this one. And my wife remembered that and she shared it with me some years later. And then I'm remembering that. And it goes something like this. If you want what you have, you'll always have what you want. Let me say that again, because it knocked me back too. Okay, when you want what you have, you'll always have what you want. Okay? And so we got to redefine the want. And what's the want? Well, I've tried that, inconsolable longing, tried that, inconsolable longing, tried that, inconsolable longing, inconsolable. I got here, still a little empty. What's going to fill it? And Paul says there's only one. And when you see all of life about getting to know this one a little more and being a little more like him, and when your life is said and done and they drop you in the ground, everybody can look at each other and say, you know what? We saw a little Jesus in that person. The way he handled his wife or spouse, the way he did his job, the way he ran his races, the way he interacted with people, the way the attitudes he lived his life with, we saw a little bit of Jesus in him. If they can say that, you've done your job. And you have truly found the secret of life purpose, contentment, and joy. Now I want to give you some practical things here. We're going to transition just a second to a closing story. But I want to give you 3 recommendations. This comes out of my filing system, out of years of filing as well. I've seen it in a lot of different books in a lot of different ways. I'm just going to kind of phrase it. It's in your YouVersion notes. Just want to phrase it simply this morning. If you go to YouVersion, okay, we use it. Go to the live events, live Stonehill. You'll see the notes and things right there. Feel free to do that if you have a smartphone. But I want to give you, having defined the purpose of life this way, getting to know and love a person. Of course, the person being Christ. What are some practical things now that we need as human beings? And this has to do with anthropology. It's what we know about being a human being. It's what we know we need on a day-to-day basis to go on and live our lives, meaningful lives, in the face of what seems so meaningless. Okay? It's crazy. It's crazy how life can get sometimes. And what are those 2 or 3 things that guide us and that we have to live out this sense of purpose and this new definition of purpose and meaning in life? 3 things. Have a project to work on, have a redemptive perspective on life's challenges, and share your life with a person or people who love you unconditionally. Those are the 3 things. I'll go over them again. Paul did this, okay? 3 recommendations for learning contentment in the everyday. You got your life purpose defined. You know where you're headed and why you're going there and who you're here to glorify. You're not walking around in the mall wondering why you're there, okay? You have a purpose in life, a meaning in life. I'm here to know and love a person, and that means loving you, and that means living life this way, and that means fulfilling obligations, responsibilities, all the while He's with me. All right? We got that. Now, how can I think about this on a daily basis? Number 1, everybody has to have a project to work on. You've got to have some reason to get out of bed every morning. You have to have it. I don't care how old you are or what condition you're in. You have to have something to do every day. And part of how God has put you together, everybody's going to define that a little differently. Okay? And however you define that is based on your gifts and your talents, your insights, what you've learned over a lifetime. But you have to have a project to work on, some reason to get out of bed in the morning, preferably something that serves other people. Paul said, I rejoice greatly in the Lord. So Paul knew life was about discovering a person and knowing a person, but he was planting churches. He was teaching the gospel, even to the soldiers he was incarcerated with. He was raising money for the poor saints in Jerusalem. He was lifting up Jesus. He was mentoring young believers and writing letters to them. Every day you have to have a project to work on. Don't be without a project in your life. Have something in front of you that you anticipate, that you enjoy even, and preferably that can serve other people. Number 1, okay? This will work for elementary school students. It'll work for high schoolers. It'll work for senior saints. It'll work for everybody across the board. We have to have a project to work on, to have this sense of meaning in life, the daily sense of meaning. Okay? Number 2, have a redemptive perspective on life's challenges. Okay, Paul said, I can do all this through Him who gives me strength. Okay, that is, when something difficult happens, he recognized ways that the difficulty also served him. And you can't keep that kind of perspective on the ground for too long, or grounded or unproductive for too long. Okay? When you have a perspective a redemptive perspective on life challenges, that everything that happens is going to end up serving me in some way, in some good way, positive way. That's how Paul got through these dark, lonely times in a Roman jail. All right? And what's interesting is, do a little research on imprisonment and incarceration. In first century in Rome, you did not have a prison kitchen cooking you 3 meals a day, giving you a cot with blankets and pillows and reading material and write-home privileges and calling privileges. No. If you're in prison, you better get some friends, because that's who's going to feed you. We don't feed you here. You figure that out on your own. And so Paul went to bed a lot of nights, empty belly, growling like crazy. He said, God, you're more than food. You're more than food. Jesus, you're more than that. Jesus said, we don't live by bread alone, but by every word. God, you've got to tap me into a spiritual resource, because I'm hungry. But you can be my sustenance right now. And he did that many nights. And then there was a friend or two that would remember him. Oh, Paul over there. How about let's take him a big sub? Meatball sub, Italian made, right here in Rome. Right? And he had that big foot-long son, and he downed that in about 3 minutes. Like, praise Jesus. I know how to be full. Right? That's how he could do it. It's like, thank you, Lord. I'll enjoy it. May not have it tomorrow. That's okay. We got it today. Let's live in the moment. Okay? And I believe that God's even going to use my imprisonment to help me witness some people and share Jesus with people. And boy, he did. You can't go wrong. When you wake up every morning, you got a project to do. Number 2, everything that happens, you're going to see a redemptive impact in it some way. God, how are you going to use it? I'm expecting you to use it for good. It's crappy right now, but I know you're going to take me places and do things in my life, my heart, and my world, because of where I am right now. Now, eventually, Epaphroditus showed up with a monetary gift. That's why Paul writes a thank you letter, like the book of Philippians, thank you letter. And while he's writing this thank you letter, he nests in it the secret to contentment and joy and life purpose. And he says, you know what the secret is? Know and love a person. When it's all boiled down to know and love a person. And do everything for his honor and his glory. Okay? So, number 2, practical thing now. Number 3, share your life with a person or people who love you unconditionally. Okay? Share your life with a person or people who love you unconditionally. Having defined that larger purpose of life, know and love a person, what am I to do now? Get up every morning, have a project to do. Redemptive perspective on everything that happens. And number 3, I want to share life with somebody. I don't want to just be a hermit or isolate myself. I want to connect with other people and see the beauty of who they are and help them see the value of what they are and who they can be, and speak Jesus' identity over everybody I see and everybody I experience and encounter. Help them to see what Jesus says about them. Paul says, you renewed your concern for me, he says. You renewed it. And the reason we even have Pauline letters is because he was sharing his life with other people. That's why he even wrote it. The letter itself, its existence and its place in the New Testament, 27 books of the New Testament. The fact that it's there, it's Paul interacting with people, people interacting with Paul, Paul doing life with other people. But Paul lived this out. He had a project to do every day. Okay, I'm up. Here I am. I lived another night in a Roman prison. I have no idea where my next bite of spoonful of whatever's going to come from, but who's this guy beside me? Can I get to know him? What can he teach me? What can I share with him? What might he go out and share with others? I'll make the best of what I can do in this situation. Okay? And then he shared his life with other people. Okay? You know, I've come to appreciate Ann Voskamp as a writer-poet, and I'm used to speed reading books. And I've learned over the years I can speed read these things, okay? And because it just helps me get through the information. There's some books, though, that I cannot speed read. Ann Voskamp's one of them because she's so poetic. She wraps poetry in and around every phrase almost. And so you got to stop and slow yourself down and realize what she's trying to say. And that's the work of a poet. They slow us down. Ann Voskamp. Pull her slide up, if you would, for me. She wrote in her book, 1,000 Gifts, a dare to live fully right where you are. And if our baptism candidates want to go get ready right now might be a good time to do that, okay? 1,000 Gifts, a dare to live fully right where you are. She really gets at this idea of joy, life purpose, even in the hard places. And of course, she's had some tough things in her life. She was raised on a farm, and at 4 years of age, she says, I can still remember seeing my parents rock the swaddled body of her sister, Amy. She said, my face was pressed against the kitchen window, and I watched my parents hold the lifeless body of my sister, Amy. And her sister had wandered into the farm lane chasing after a cat just after a delivery driver was pulling up. And she can remember the delivery driver's sobs. And she can remember the lifeless body, and she's just a young girl. And she said for years, the picture of her sister crumpled in gravel stayed with her, and she couldn't shake it. Anne got older, and she read books to escape the thoughts that she had, and the discouraging and depressing circumstantial thoughts of her past. And she could picture her mom sitting in a psychiatric hospital, aching for the baby that bled through the blankets. And she said that image just stayed with her, and that circumstance defined everything in her life. She couldn't find joy. She couldn't find life purpose. She couldn't find contentment. It was just too graphic and too powerful for her to overcome. And so with all this trauma happening early in life, it stole away the joy of living. She was on prescriptions for a while. Her mind, she said, was scrambled. Anxiety became my default posture in life. At 17 years of age, she drops an empty jar jam, or a jam jar, on the floor, and it shatters, and she takes a piece of the glass. And she says she tried to cut away from her wrist up her arm. She tried to cut away the self-hatred and the anxiety that she had carried for so many years. She said, I was just strangled by all of this. And years later now, she's processed through some of the woundedness of the past. And she says, years later now, she's married she's a homeschooling mother of 6. She's married to a farmer. She doesn't have fancy degrees or titles or diplomas hanging on the finger-smudged walls, she says, but she loves to write books, and she's written them, and she loves to turn her phrase, and she does a good job of that, and she's found a measure of healing in her walk with the Lord. But years later, she says, I'm sitting at the hairdresser, and I'm having some stuff done, and a woman was sitting next to me, and she's reading a book that Anne could see the title of the book in the mirror that was in front of her, and she can look in the mirror and see that the title of the book was 1,000 Places to See Before You Die. And I've actually seen that book, and it's kind of interesting, and some of the places I've never heard of, have no idea where they are, and really have no interest to go. But a couple of them I actually been to. I thought it was interesting. Mackinac Island. How many of you have been to Mackinac Island? It's in the book, 1,000 Places to See Before You Die. How many of you have seen Denali National Park? Okay? Yeah, that's in there as well. Then there's like 998 more of them. All right? And you'll have to get the book. And so she sees this and she says to herself, is that it? Is that it? Seeing all these new places, this is supposed to spark wonder and joy in a person. But she says, isn't it here that I can find joy? Can I find it here? And in so many words, is life merely about struggling to see something new and exotic? And what if there are wonders all around me that if I had eyes to see, they would bring me joy right where I'm at? And she said the face of Jesus kind of flashes in her mind. and the God-man who came to save me from prisons of fear and guilt and depression and sadness. And she said those that three-letter word, though, joy. And this week when I was typing the message, several times I accidentally typed J-O-E-Y, Joey. Okay? It's not Joey. Joey doesn't bring a lot of joy. It's Jesus that brings the joy. But this word joy, this concept of joy, was so slippery in her life. And she says, after the cutting, after the prescriptions, the holy grail of joy is not some exotic location or some emotional mountain peak experience. She says the joy wonder can be here. It's here in the messy. It's here in the piercing ache of now. Joy might be unbelievably possible, and the only place we need to see before we die is the place of seeing God here and now, right where we're at. She's always been about lists. Every mom with a family knows that your life operates off of lists. If you don't list it out, things don't get done. Things get forgotten. You got all these things to do for your family. And there's food prep, and there's homework, and there's appointments, and there's things on the farm. She lives on a farm, so she lives her life by lists. And a friend challenged her, and there's 1,000 places to see before you die. Let me give you a challenge. Why don't you write a list of 1,000 gifts, 1,000 blessings? And so she begins. And she doesn't share all the 1,000 things in her book. She occasionally breaks into the gift list, the blessing list, and she allows you to see some of the simple things that start to bring her joy. She said, I didn't even recognize these things as gifts until I started writing them down. And so over several days, she's especially aware of things that she loves, and she makes her list, and she starts feeling joy. She's never left her hometown. She never went to one of those 1,000 places, but she's starting to feel more joyful because she's constructing this list. The cry of a blue jay from high in the spruce, leafy life scent of the florist shop, faint aroma of cattle and straw, moonlight on pillows, first frost crunch. And on she goes. Her husband comes in from the barn one day, and he finds her with her camera, and she's leaning over a plate of cheese that she's just grated and is sitting in the sunlight. And she says, I felt kind of foolish. I mean, it's curls of mozzarella and cheddar piled high in a pond of golden day. She's a poet. And she can see how he's probably not going to understand this, though. But he catches her right away, and he says, you know what, honey? He says, I like finding you just like this. And let's let Ann tell it. She says, he wraps one arm around my middle, and he draws me close. He says, I like finding you just like this, crazy like this. She blushes, and he brushes close with the 4-day stubble on his chin, and he laughs. And he said, I like finding you just like this, crazy like this, perfect like this. And he nods toward the plate of cheese, and he says, you being happy in all these little things that God gives, it makes me so happy. And it surprised her. And she never stepped foot out of her farmhouse. Joy is the reality, the fullest life. The joy is always given. It's never grasped. God gives gifts, she says, and I give thanks, and I unwrap the gift given, joy. And so Ann Voskamp snapped that picture of cheese, and she goes on to say, I roll out the dough, I sprinkle the ring cheese on the round thin pizza. I think how God glory in a cheese ring might seem trifling, even offensive to focus the lens of a heart on the minute. In a world mangled and maimed and desperately empty, and I know there's poor and there's hideous suffering in the world. I have lived the pain, and my life can tell it. I only deepen the wound of the world when I neglect to give thanks for early light dappled through leaves, for the heavy perfume of wild roses in early July, for the song of crickets on humid nights, and the rivers that run, and the stars that rise, and the rain that falls, and all the good things that a good God gives. Why would the world need more anger and more outrage? How does it save the world to reject unabashed joy when it is joy that saves us? a Jesus joy. Rejecting joy to stand in solidarity with the suffering doesn't rescue the suffering, she says. The converse does. The brave who focus on all things good and all things beautiful and all things true, even in the small, who give thanks for it and discover you even in the here and now. They are the change agents who bring fullest light to all the world. And when we lay the soil of our hard lives open to the rain of grace and let joy penetrate our cracked and dry places, let joy soak into our broken skin and deep crevices, life grows. Ann Voskamp has found the definition of joy, purpose, contentment. It's knowing and loving a person. And loving him even more by taking the time to see the good gifts that he gives, even grated American and mozzarella cheese in morning sunlight that's going to go on a pizza. That's beautiful. Feed her family. And oh, and by the way, her friend Linda, who first suggested that she write down this list of 1,000 gifts, rented a flat in Paris for 6 weeks, invited her to come and see the sights of Paris for a week. And on her plane ride over, she said, for years I tried medication, I tried the blade, the cutting, I tried work, I tried escaping in various ways. All attempts to drown out that incessant drum of self-rejection I'd felt in my life. But there on a plane in the cover of Black Waters, I hear it so well. The only thing to rip out the tape echoing of self-rejection in my life is the song of his serenade. 1,000 gifts tune me to the best. To the beat. She's back home now. And it's spring on the farm. A mourning dove is sitting on a clutch of blue eggs under the leaves of the sunburst locust by the porch. And she said, I take a load of sun-dried laundry off the line. I balance the basket of fresh towels on one hip. I step in the back mudroom door. There's piles of dirty jeans. There's Legos scattered. There's mud tracks across the floor. The washing machine groans. The oven timer beeps. And she thinks, why not let all of life be penetrated by grace and gratitude and joy? My gratitude journal, she says, is lying open on its permanent home on the countertop, enumerating the moments, making a ledger of his love. And no, I'll never stop the counting, never cease transcribing the ballad of the world, the rhyme of his heart. He and I, a couplet, count 1,000 gifts, bless the Holy One 100 times a day, commune with His presence, filling the laundry room, the kitchen, the hospital, the graveyard. This is what it means to be fully alive. And so this morning, Ann Voskamp, Apostle Paul, Augustine, and so many others stand before people just like you, just like me. And they invite you to redefine the purpose, the meaning, the contentment of life. And meaning in life has to be something greater than our happiness, greater than travel, greater than material goods, greater than sensual gratification, greater than success, greater than social media likes, greater than notifications and status likes. All these things give quick spites of pleasure and then they fade. And somehow in our contentment we still have a need for this imperishable bliss. And so this morning I hold out to you a brand new way to see and to live. And this morning, if this resonates and you're ready for a life change, then I invite you to join me in the waters of baptism. If we could have our volunteers to come and lift off our lid here, we're going to transition to time of baptism now.